My name is Madeline, and 12 years ago, I met James at a business networking event. He was a senior manager at a trading company, charming and intelligent, with kind eyes that made me feel at ease. What really won me over, though, was how he talked about his 13-year-old daughter, Sarah. The love in his voice when he mentioned her name was unmistakable. I'd built my chain of beauty salons from the ground up, and success had brought me everything except what I wanted most, a family. I couldn't have children of my own, a fact I'd learned to live with, but meeting James and Sarah felt like a second chance. We got married 6 months later, and they moved into my house. The income difference between James and me was substantial. I made several times what he did, but it never bothered me. Love isn't about money, and I was just happy to finally have the family I'd always wanted. When Sarah turned 16, I bought her first car, a safe, reliable model that made her squeal with joy. "This is really mine," she'd asked, tears in her eyes as she hugged me. "Thank you, Madeline. You're the best." 2 years later, when college acceptance letters started arriving, I didn't hesitate to offer to pay for her education. It wasn't Harvard, but it was a good school, and Sarah was thrilled. Those early years were beautiful. We were happy. I had everything I'd ever wanted, a loving husband, a stepdaughter who seemed to appreciate me, and a home filled with laughter. Sarah even stayed with us after college, saying she wanted to save money while starting her career. I'll never forget that spring evening when Sarah came home practically glowing with excitement. She'd been dating Michael for 2 years, and I knew him well, a decent young man who worked as a software engineer and treated her like a princess. Still, when she burst through the door waving her left hand with a diamond ring sparkling on it, I was genuinely surprised. "Dad, Madeline," he proposed, she squealed, bouncing on her toes like she was 16 again instead of 25. "We're getting married." James jumped up to hug her while I stood there grinning like an idiot. This was exactly the kind of family moment I'd always dreamed of having. Michael came over later that evening, and we opened a bottle of champagne I'd been saving for a special occasion. "I know this is a big ask," Sarah said, looking nervous as she played with her engagement ring. "But we've been looking at venues and everything, and—" "How much?" I asked, already reaching for my phone to check my accounts. "Well, with everything included, around $150,000, she said quietly, then rushed to add, "But of course, we don't expect—" "Done," I interrupted, smiling. "I'll set up an account tomorrow that you can access for all the wedding expenses." The look of relief and joy on her face made every penny worth it. "Really? Oh my God, Madeline, thank you so much." She threw her arms around me, and I hugged her back tightly, remembering that teenage girl who'd first welcomed me into her life. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of excitement. Sarah included me in everything at first. We'd sit at the kitchen table late into the night, looking at wedding magazines and Pinterest boards. She'd text me pictures of dresses she was considering and ask my opinion on color schemes. "What do you think about these flowers?" she'd ask, showing me photos of elaborate bouquets. "Too much? Not enough?" "I love the pink peonies," I'd say, and she'd make notes in her wedding planner. She found her dream dress, a stunning designer gown that cost more than my first car, and I didn't even blink at the price tag. The way her eyes lit up when she tried it on was worth every cent. The venue she chose was spectacular, an elegant historic hotel downtown with crystal chandeliers and marble floors. The menu she selected featured premium dishes that would impress any food critic. I transferred the money as promised, and Sarah dove into the planning with enthusiasm. But then, about 2 months into the planning, something shifted. The detailed updates became shorter, vaguer. Instead of our long planning sessions, she'd rush through dinner and disappear into her room or go to Michael's place. "How's the planning going?" I'd ask. "Fine," she'd reply, barely looking up from her phone. "Everything's on track." When I'd try to get more specific details, she'd give non-committal answers. "Oh, just finalizing some things." Or, "Don't worry, it's all under control." I told myself not to be hurt by this gradual exclusion. After all, planning a wedding is stressful, and she was probably just overwhelmed. Maybe she needed some space to make her own decisions. I remembered being young and wanting to prove I could handle things on my own. James noticed my concern one night as we got ready for bed. "Everything okay?" he asked. "You seem worried." "I'm probably just being silly," I said, trying to smile. "It's just, Sarah seems different lately. More distant." "She's just busy with the wedding," he assured me, kissing my forehead. "You know how it is, so many details to manage. Try not to worry." I nodded and tried to push my concerns aside. But there was a nagging feeling in my gut that something wasn't quite right. The happy bubble we'd been living in felt like it was starting to develop tiny cracks, and I couldn't shake the sensation that this was just the beginning. As the weeks passed, I decided to take a more active role in the wedding planning again. One morning, over coffee, I casually brought up something that had been on my mind. "Sarah, honey, I was wondering about the guest list," I said, watching her scroll through her phone. "Have you figured out how many people you're inviting?" She looked up briefly. "Oh, yeah, we're keeping it small, about 50 people." "That's nice, intimate," I nodded, then added, "I'd love to include my parents and my sister. They've always adored you, and they'd be thrilled to be there." The change in Sarah's expression was immediate and startling. Her face hardened, and she put down her phone with deliberate slowness. "Actually, we're only inviting close relatives and friends. This is supposed to be a really personal celebration. I don't want to include people who aren't, actually family." The words hit me like ice water. After 12 years, after everything we'd shared, my family wasn't actually family to her? I took a deep breath, trying to keep my voice gentle. "Sarah, I understand wanting to keep things intimate, but my parents have known you since you were 13. They'd been to every one of your birthdays, your graduation." I paused, then added quietly, "And I am paying for the entire wedding. Surely we can make an exception for 3 people who care about you." Her face immediately twisted into a pout, and I could see the anger flash in her eyes at the mention of money. She pushed her chair back from the table with more force than necessary. "Fine," she snapped. "I'll send invitations to your mom and sister. Happy now?" Before I could respond, she grabbed her phone and stormed out of the kitchen. I heard the front door slam a few minutes later. That evening, James came into our bedroom with that look on his face, the one that told me I wasn't going to like what he had to say. "We need to talk about what happened with Sarah today," he began, sitting on the edge of our bed. "Okay," I said, putting down my book. "What about it?" "She called me crying earlier. Said you were really rude to her about the guest list. She's staying at Michael's tonight because she's so upset." I stared at him in disbelief. "Rude to her?" "James, she told me my family wasn't welcome at her wedding, a wedding I'm paying for, by the way. And I stayed completely calm when I talked to her about it." "I know, but maybe you could be a little more gentle with her," he suggested. "She's under a lot of stress with the wedding planning." I explained exactly what had happened, word for word, and I could see him processing it. He ran his hand through his hair, something he always did when he was troubled. "Okay," he finally said. "I see what you mean. I'll talk to her about it tomorrow." The next 2 weeks passed in an uneasy peace. Sarah had returned home and was acting as if nothing had happened, chattering about wedding details over breakfast and asking my opinion about centerpieces again. But something felt off, like the calm before a storm. Then came the bombshell at dinner. "So," Sarah said, pushing her pasta around her plate, "Mom found out about the wedding. She's back in town." I nearly choked on my wine. James's fork clattered against his plate. In 12 years, Sarah's mother, Linda, had barely been mentioned in our house. I knew the basics. She'd had a drinking problem, which led to the divorce, then moved to Arizona and essentially abandoned Sarah. No birthday cards, no Christmas calls, nothing. "She really wants to be involved in the wedding planning," Sarah continued, her voice bright with an enthusiasm I couldn't understand. "Actually, I invited her over for dinner this weekend." Here. My hand tightened around my wine glass. This was my house, the house I'd bought with my own money, the house where I'd created a home for us all. The proper thing would have been for Sarah to ask permission before inviting someone over, especially someone with Linda's history. But I remembered the guest list argument and bit my tongue. One more confrontation wasn't worth it. James sat there silently, suddenly very interested in his pasta. That weekend, I spent hours preparing a perfect dinner: herb-crusted rack of lamb, roasted vegetables, homemade bread. I wanted everything to be flawless, though I couldn't explain why I felt the need to impress a woman who'd abandoned her daughter. Linda arrived exactly 30 minutes late. She was tall and blonde like Sarah, but with hard edges where Sarah was soft. Her eyes scanned every inch of my home as she walked in, lingering on the artwork, the furniture, the view from the windows. I recognized the look, envy poorly disguised as appraisal. "What a large house," she said, emphasizing large in a way that made it sound like an insult. Dinner started pleasantly enough, but it didn't stay that way. Linda took a bite of the lamb and pursed her lips. She said, cutting another piece with deliberate slowness. "You know, I always made this with rosemary and garlic. It really brings out the flavor better. Sarah used to love it when I made it." I took a sip of wine and said nothing. "And these vegetables," she continued, pushing them around her plate. "They're a bit overdone, aren't they? I always found that keeping them crispy makes them so much more appetizing." With each criticism, I waited for James to say something, anything. He'd been married to this woman, he knew exactly who she was and what she was doing. But he kept his eyes on his plate, cutting his food into smaller and smaller pieces. I sat there, watching this woman criticize my cooking in my own home, while my husband stayed silent and my stepdaughter beamed at her long-lost mother as if she'd hung the moon. Something inside me shifted, hardened. As dinner wound down, Linda dabbed her lips with her napkin and turned to Sarah. "So, honey, tell me about the venue. Which hotel did you pick?" "The Grand Morrison downtown," Sarah replied, brightening at the change of subject. "It's beautiful, Mom. They have these amazing crystal chandeliers and—" "The Grand Morrison?" Linda's face wrinkled with distaste. "Oh, sweetie, you can't have your wedding there. That place is so basic. Now, the Belmont Plaza, that's where you should be having it. Much more prestigious." I gripped my fork tighter, knowing the Belmont Plaza cost nearly twice what we were already spending. "The wedding we're planning isn't exactly cheap," I said, trying to keep my voice level. "The Grand Morrison is a lovely venue." Linda's eyes narrowed. "Well, you can't cut corners on your only daughter's wedding. It's the most important day of her life." Something inside me snapped. 12 years of love, support, and financial sacrifice reduced to cutting corners by a woman who hadn't sent her daughter so much as a birthday card. "If you're so concerned about the venue," I said, meeting her gaze directly, "feel free to pay for the Belmont Plaza yourself. Since I'm the one covering the entire $150,000 for this wedding, I think the Grand Morrison will do just fine." The silence that followed was deafening. Linda's face flushed red. She stood up so quickly, her chair scraped against the floor. "I can see I'm not welcome here," she announced, grabbing her purse. "Sarah, call me tomorrow, honey." She stormed out, the front door slamming behind her. Sarah whirled on me, her face contorted with rage. "How dare you?" she screamed. "How dare you throw the money in Mom's face like that? You're cruel and greedy, and you've ruined everything." She ran upstairs, and I heard her door slam too. I sat there, stunned, as James helped himself to another glass of wine. Later that night, he came to our bedroom looking stern. "You need to apologize to Sarah," he said. "What you said to Linda was completely out of line." I stared at him in disbelief. "Apologize? For what? Telling the truth? Your ex-wife came into my house, criticized everything I did, and then suggested I was being cheap about a wedding I'm paying for entirely on my own. Still, you didn't have to embarrass her like that. And now Sarah's upset." "I'm not apologizing," I said firmly. Not this time. He grabbed his pillow. Fine. I'll sleep in the living room until you come to your senses. The next morning, my phone rang while I was making coffee alone in the kitchen. It was my mother. "Maddie, honey," she said, her voice concerned. "I wanted to ask you about Sarah's wedding. What's the date and venue?" "Dad and I haven't received an invitation yet, and neither has Jenny. I thought they must have gotten lost in the mail." I sat at the kitchen counter for hours after my mother's call, my coffee going cold beside me. The morning sun crawled across the floor as I waited, my anger building with each passing minute. Around 11, I heard Sarah's key in the lock. She'd been out since breakfast, probably with Linda. "Sarah," I called out, my voice steady, despite the rage simmering inside me. "We need to talk." She walked into the kitchen, still wearing yesterday's clothes. "What is it?" she asked, not quite meeting my eyes. "I just got a call from my mother," I said, watching her face carefully. She was asking about the wedding invitations, the ones that apparently never arrived. Sarah's expression hardened, a look I'd never seen before crossing her face. She lifted her chin defiantly. "I'm not inviting them." "Excuse me?" "I'm not inviting strangers to my wedding," she said, each word deliberately cruel. The word strangers hit me like a physical blow. My parents had been at every Christmas, every birthday, every milestone for 12 years. My sister had helped Sarah prepare for her college interviews. Strangers? "That's wrong, Sarah," I said, fighting to keep my voice level. "And it's ugly. These people have loved you and supported you for years." She laughed, a harsh, bitter sound I'd never heard from her before. "You want to talk about ugly? After what you did to my mom last night?" Her eyes flashed with anger. "Actually, you know what? I don't want you at my wedding either." Time seemed to stop. The kitchen fell silent except for the quiet hum of the refrigerator. 12 years of love, support, and sacrifice reduced to this moment. "Let me make sure I understand," I said slowly. "You don't want me, the person paying for your entire wedding, to attend?" "That's right," she said, lifting her chin higher. I felt an odd sense of calm wash over me. All the hurt and anger of the past few weeks crystallized into perfect clarity. I smiled, which seemed to unnerve her slightly. "That's fine," I said, my voice pleasantly light. "I won't come to your wedding." Without another word, I walked upstairs to my home office. My hands didn't shake at all as I logged into my banking app and revoked Sarah's access to the wedding account. It took less than a minute, just a few clicks to end what had taken 12 years to build. Next, I called Robert, the wedding planner. He answered on the second ring. "Robert, this is Madeline Harrison. I need you to cancel all the wedding arrangements." Excuse me?" He sounded bewildered. "Is everything all right?" "No, it's not," I said honestly. "But it will be. Please cancel everything and process the refund to my account." The Grand Morrison was my next call. The events manager was apologetic but firm. They couldn't refund the deposit for the food and beverages that had already been ordered. It was a few $1,000s lost, but at that moment, it felt like money well spent. That evening, the house was silent. James was still sleeping in the living room. I could hear him shifting on the couch as I got ready for bed. As I lay there alone in the dark, I realized I didn't feel sad anymore. I felt free. The next morning, I took my time getting dressed. I chose my favorite blue silk blouse and pearl earrings, armor, for what I knew would be a difficult day. When I finally went downstairs for breakfast, the storm broke immediately. Sarah and James were already at the kitchen table, clearly waiting for me. The moment I appeared, Sarah leaped to her feet, her face red with fury. "What did you do?" she screamed. "How dare you cancel my wedding? How dare you block my access to the account? That money was for my wedding." I poured myself a cup of coffee, my hands steady. "I'm not going to sponsor a wedding I'm not invited to," I said simply, taking a sip. "You can't do this." Sarah's voice rose higher, tears starting to stream down her face. You've ruined everything. The venue, the flowers, the dress, it's all gone. I set my coffee cup down carefully. Actually, I can do this, and I did. Why don't you ask the people you actually want at your wedding to pay for it? Sarah's face crumpled. She let out a horrible, gasping sob and ran from the kitchen. Her footsteps thundered up the stairs, followed by the slam of her bedroom door. James stood up slowly, his face dark with anger. Fix this, he growled. Right now. Call everyone back, reopen the account, and arrange everything again. Or I'll file for divorce. The threat hung in the air between us. 12 years of marriage reduced to this moment. I looked at the man I'd loved, really looked at him, and wondered how I'd never seen this side of him before. Okay, I said calmly. File for divorce, I'm not against it. The color drained from his face. He clearly hadn't expected this response. Madeline, you can't be serious. I am, and since this is my house, I'd like you and Sarah to leave by tomorrow. His anger deflated like a punctured balloon. Look, he said, his tone suddenly conciliatory, I overreacted. We need to talk about this, think it through. I've already thought it through, I interrupted. I'm done living with people who don't appreciate or respect me. I'm done trying to buy love. The rest of the day passed in a blur of slammed doors and muffled arguments upstairs. At exactly 7 that evening, James and Sarah appeared in the foyer with their suitcases. Sarah's eyes were red and puffy from crying. I never thought you could be so cruel, she spat. I felt a laugh bubble up inside me, a genuine laugh of disbelief. Cruel? I paid for your clothes, your car, your education. I gave you a home, loved you like my own daughter, and was ready to spend $150,000 on your wedding. And you have the nerve to call me cruel, because I won't let you treat me like dirt. The door closed behind them with a quiet click, so much gentler than all the angry slams of the past few days. I stood in my foyer, and listened to the silence of my house. The house felt different after they left, lighter somehow, as if a weight I hadn't known I was carrying had been lifted. I spent the first few days reorganizing spaces, reclaiming rooms that had slowly become filled with Sarah's things over the years. It was therapeutic, like cleaning out an old wound. Then came the message from Michael's mother. It popped up on my social media one evening while I was enjoying a glass of wine on my patio. I hope you realize what you've done, the message read. This wedding could fail entirely because of your actions. How can you be so heartless? I took my time responding, choosing my words carefully. I'm not heartless, I wrote back. I'm just done being disrespected. I won't pay for a wedding I'm not even invited to. If you're so concerned about the wedding's success, feel free to pay for it yourself. She read the message, but never replied. I imagined her sitting there, probably as shocked as James had been that I wouldn't back down. It's funny how people react when you finally stand up for yourself, like they can't quite believe you've stopped playing by their rules. I contacted my lawyer the next day. She'd helped me draft the prenup 12 years ago, and now she'd helped me end the marriage it had protected. The divorce papers were ready within a week. When I called James to tell him they were ready, he tried his old tactics again. Maddie, please, he said, his voice soft and pleading, the voice that used to make my heart melt. We can start over. We can fix this. I hung up. He came to get the papers the next morning. He looked older somehow, tired. The competent man who'd threatened me with divorce was gone, replaced by someone who seemed lost. Sarah's been crying nonstop, he said, standing in my foyer, no longer our foyer. The wedding's going to be at City Hall now. No reception, no flowers, no fancy dress. Just a basic ceremony. I shrugged, remembering all the tears I'd shed over their betrayal. That's not my problem. How can you be so cold about this? It's not cold, James. It's just not my responsibility anymore. He took the papers and left. I watched him walk to his car, the car I'd bought him, and drive away. It felt final, but not sad. Just finished. The divorce was completed 2 months later. The prenup made everything simple. He couldn't touch my house, my business, or any of my assets. Sometimes I wondered if he'd ever really read that document, if he'd understood what it meant when he signed it 12 years ago. It didn't matter now. People ask me sometimes if I know how Sarah's wedding went. If she wore the dress she'd chosen, if Linda was there, if it was everything she'd dreamed of. I honestly don't know. I blocked them all on social media, changed my phone number, moved on with my life. What I do know is this: you can't buy love. Not real love, anyway. You can't purchase respect or gratitude or loyalty. I spent 12 years trying to build a family with my checkbook, and in the end, all it got me was a front row seat to watch that family choose someone else over me. But here's the thing about endings: they're also beginnings. My house is peaceful now. My business is thriving. And when I sit in my garden with my morning coffee, watching the sun rise over my flowers, I don't feel lonely. I feel free. Life before Michael was pretty straight-laced: wake up, trade a bit on the stock exchange, head to my job in online advertising, then rinse and repeat. Simple, mundane, but it was mine. I always figured that someday I'd add a family to the mix: husband, kids, the whole shebang. I met Michael at a seminar for amateur traders. He was a speaker, all confidence and broad smiles, talking about big moves in the real estate market. After his talk, we ended up at the same coffee station. Strong coffee, strong investments, right? He joked, pouring himself a cup. Something like that. But I usually go for less volatile stocks myself, I replied, trying to sound more savvy than I felt. Oh, playing it safe, huh? I like taking a bit more risk, he said with a wink. That wink should have been my first warning, but who was I to know? We started seeing each other, and things moved fast, swept up in romance and the excitement of it all. He was 10 years older, had his life figured out, or so it seemed. Loads of charm, money, and promises that came easy to him. About a year into our whirlwind romance, Michael popped the question on a chilly evening, right there on the balcony of his fancy high-rise apartment. "Marry me, Sarah. I want all my tomorrows to start with you," he said, holding out a ring that was frankly too flashy for my taste. But who was I to complain? It felt like a dream. 2 days before the wedding, Michael dropped another surprise, just as we were finalizing our dinner menu. "We need to talk about something, Sarah. It's important," he said, serious all of a sudden. "Sure, what's up?" I asked, figuring it was just some last-minute guest list drama. "I think we should sign a prenuptial agreement," he said, avoiding my eyes. "A prenup? Now? 2 days before the wedding?" I was shocked, feeling a mix of hurt and confusion. "Why didn't you bring this up before?" "It's just practical, Sarah. It's not about us, it's about protecting what we've got. You know, just in case. I've got a lot tied up in real estate, and you're doing well with your trading. It's just standard stuff. My lawyer drafted something up. He says it's pretty standard, protects both of us." His casual dismissal stung. "Standard for who, Michael? Your lawyer? I don't even have one." "Look, he's a good guy. He'll take care of everything, even talk you through it." "On me, of course. I'll pay for it," he added quickly, as if that would smooth everything over. I remember standing there in his kitchen, feeling like a complete outsider in what was supposed to be my future home, with my future husband who suddenly seemed like a stranger. But I was too deep in, too embarrassed to call anything off, and honestly, too scared to start over. So, I caved. "Fine. Let's just get this over with," I muttered, feeling a mix of defeat and anger boiling inside. "Great, I'll set up a meeting for tomorrow. You'll see, it's all standard stuff," Michael assured me, but his reassurances felt hollow. The next day, his lawyer, a slick guy named Ron, walked me through the document. "It's all very straightforward," Ron assured me, flipping through pages that might as well have been written in another language. "You keep what's yours, he keeps his. Clean and simple." Clean and simple, right. If only I knew then just how complicated things would get. After the whirlwind of the wedding, which honestly was more of a blur of faces and congratulations than anything, Michael and I settled into what you could call married life. But even that felt more like living with a charming roommate than a husband, what with all the terms we'd signed off on. Michael's life was a series of business calls and trips. "Gotta keep the wheels turning, Sarah," he'd say, kissing my forehead before jetting off to some city or another. I mostly stayed back, working from home, trading stocks like it was my lifeline. It wasn't the family life I'd pictured, but then again, what was? His business was booming, and my trading wasn't doing too bad either. But whenever I brought up maybe putting my earnings into buying a place for me, Michael had his own ideas. "Hold off on that, babe. I'm eyeing a new property, could use a bit more liquidity," he'd say, always planning the next big purchase. One evening, he came home more stressed than usual. "Market's brutal, babe. Got a loan coming up due that I totally spaced on," he admitted over a too-late dinner. "Can't you roll it over or something?" I asked, trying not to sound too concerned. "That's the kicker. It's tied up with my other assets. Bit of a cash flow snag," he explained, sounding tired. Suddenly he remembered my savings, the ones I'd been hoping to put towards a house, maybe start that dream family. "You could help," he said slowly. "I mean, it'll ease the snag." Michael looked at me then pleadingly, really looked at me, and for a moment, I thought I saw the man I'd fallen in love with. "Okay, I'll do it. What's mine is yours," I said, echoing the words he hadn't exactly said but had implied in so many ways. Right, of course, babe. It's just until this thing smooths over. I'll pay you back," he promised, reaching over to squeeze my hand. I nodded, feeling a mix of apprehension and love. Love because I believed in us, in him. Apprehension because, deep down, I knew money and love were a messy mix. Days turned into weeks, and those weeks into months. Michael's promises of repayment became as frequent as his business trips, mentioned but never fulfilled. Our conversations about it were circular, always ending with him kissing my forehead and promising, "Soon, babe, soon." And me? I believed him every time. Or at least, I wanted to. Because confronting the truth, that this was becoming less of a marriage and more of a business arrangement, was a reality I wasn't ready to face. The arrival of our son, Jack, was supposed to be the happiest time in our lives, but it quickly turned into one of the most challenging. Michael was often away on business trips, leaving me to juggle the baby, household duties, and my own work. I wasn't just riding the emotional roller coaster of a new mom, I was doing it pretty much on my own. One evening, after a particularly grueling day of balancing Jack on my hip while trading on my laptop, I broached a topic that had been weighing on me. "Michael, I was thinking, maybe we could get a little help? Like a nanny?" I suggested tentatively over dinner. Michael, who had just returned from a trip to Chicago, looked up from his plate, eyebrows raised. "A nanny? Sarah, come on, we agreed you'd handle home stuff. Jack needs his mom, not some stranger." "But I'm also trying to work, Michael. The trading doesn't just happen by itself, and it's our livelihood too," I countered, feeling the frustration bubble up inside. "You're doing fine. What, you want a medal for doing what you're supposed to do?" His tone was dismissive, and it stung more than I expected. "You knew what you were signing up for. I'm out earning, you're home with the kid. We're both doing our parts, right?" As weeks turned into months, the financial strain began to show. Michael stopped transferring money to our joint account, leaving me to handle all the expenses, the taxes on the house, the car payments, groceries, clothes, everything for Jack. It wasn't just the physical toll, the financial juggle was becoming a nightmare. One night, after paying the latest batch of bills and realizing my account was running dangerously low, I confronted Michael. He had just come back from another trip and was in a surly mood. "Michael, the joint account is dry. I had to use my savings to cover everything these last few months. When can you transfer some money?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. He scoffed, tossing his keys on the table. "Oh, come on, Sarah. You live in my house, drive my car, and you're still complaining? You should be grateful. Grateful? Michael, I am managing everything here while you're gone. I'm not asking for thanks, but I need support, I said, my voice rising in frustration. Look, I'm dealing with a lot right now. The business needs every penny. You're not the only one with pressures, Sarah, he retorted before heading off to the shower, effectively ending the conversation. It was clear I was on my own. I couldn't rely on Michael. I needed to ensure financial security for myself and Jack. That's when I threw myself into stock trading more seriously. Each day, after Jack fell asleep, I'd stay up, researching and making trades. Slowly, my account began to grow, bolstered by a series of successful deals. Keeping this a secret from Michael felt wrong, but necessary. He had made it clear that his money was his. Well, mine would be mine. I set up a separate account he didn't know about, moving my trading profits there. It was the only slice of independence I felt I could cling to. Jack was growing up fast, and with him, the daily logistics were becoming more complicated. The old car we had was barely hanging on, not nearly spacious enough for his stroller and all the paraphernalia that seemed necessary whenever we stepped out the door. One morning, while Michael was sipping his coffee and scrolling through his phone, I brought up the topic. I need a new car, Michael. The trunk in this one just isn't cutting it for Jack's stuff. He didn't look up from his screen. And you're telling me this why? Planning to make me pay for it? No, I've got it covered. I've been saving up from trading, I replied, trying to keep my voice even. That got his attention. His eyes narrowed as he put down his phone. Oh, you've got money, huh? Well, that's great, because I need some cash. The business could use a boost right now. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Again with the money? What about the money I lent you before? You promised to pay that back, and you haven't. I need a car for Jack, not to sink more into your endless business needs. He shrugged, a smirk forming. Business is what keeps us living in style, Sarah. You should know that by now. Help me out, and I'll get you a new car later. I stood my ground this time. No, Michael, no more. I need to take care of our son. I'm buying the car with or without your help. For a moment, he looked shocked, like he couldn't believe I was defying him. Then his expression hardened. Fine, how about this? If you're so set on this path, maybe we shouldn't be together. You want to split? Because trust me, you won't get a dime in the divorce. Remember that prenup you signed? His words were like a slap. I knew the prenup was there, but his threat to use it so bluntly was still a shock. If that's how you see our marriage, then maybe a divorce is the best thing, I said quietly, the reality of our crumbling relationship hitting me all at once. Fine by me. But remember, you leave with what you came with, nothing. And you'll need to find a new place to live. Consider this your 3-day notice, he said coldly, pulling out a drawer and tossing the prenuptial agreement on the table between us. I glanced at the document, the unfairness of it all burning in my chest. You think you can just throw me and Jack out like we're nothing? I've been here through everything, supporting you, never asking for anything more than what I put into this family. He laughed, a harsh sound that echoed in the empty room. You think any of that matters? I've got the best lawyers. Don't try to fight me, Sarah. You'll lose. And don't think about taking anything from here, or I'll sue. Packing was a blur of tears and determination. I collected mine and Jack's belongings, leaving behind everything that Michael could claim as his. I wasn't going to give him any reason to come after me legally. The apartment I found was small, but it was ours, and it was close to Jack's kindergarten, which made life a little easier. Every day, as I walked him to school, I felt a bit more grounded, a bit more like I could do this, raise my son and rebuild our lives. The stock market became my sanctuary and my battlefield. I traded with a ferocity born of necessity, the need to provide for Jack and keep us afloat without any help from Michael. Nights were the hardest, after Jack went to bed and the world quieted down. That's when the doubts and the loneliness crept in. But every time I wanted to give in to despair, I'd look at the numbers climbing in my account, and I'd find the strength to keep pushing. Divorce proceedings were as cold and swift as Michael's farewell. The prenuptial agreement held up, leaving me with nothing but child support, which was a pittance compared to what Michael made. He fought dirty, too, throwing around threats to take Jack if I pushed for any of the money I'd lent him for that so-called urgent loan. It was during one of those mornings, dropping Jack off at kindergarten, that I met Laura. She was the mother of Emily, a little girl with a wild mop of curls and a laugh that could light up a room. Laura and I hit it off immediately, often finding ourselves chatting long after the kids had scampered off to their morning activities. One sunny afternoon, as we watched our kids play, Laura turned to me, her expression curious. "You always seem so together, Sarah. How do you do it?" "I mean, I struggle, and it's just me." I shrugged, my eyes on Jack, who was busy constructing a sandcastle. "I guess you just learn to cope, you know? Keep pushing through." We talk about everything and nothing, movies, books, our wild dreams of vacations in exotic places. But I never brought up Michael or the divorce. That part of my life was locked away, a chapter one was determined to close. One day, as we watched Jack and Emily scramble up the steps of a slide, Laura nudged me gently. "You know, if you ever need to talk about anything, I'm here. Us single moms have to stick together." I smiled, the warmth from her offer spreading through me. "Thanks, Laura. That means a lot." After a particularly good day on the stock exchange, I felt a rare surge of optimism. Maybe it was the adrenaline from the win, or maybe I just needed a change of scenery from the usual routine. Whatever it was, I called up Laura and suggested dinner at a new restaurant downtown. "Sounds like a celebration is in order." "What's the occasion?" Laura asked as we settled into our seats at the chic, softly lit venue. "Just a good day at work," I replied, trying to keep it casual, but inside I was buzzing. It felt like things were finally looking up. As we sipped on our drinks and chatted about mundane things like kindergarten antics and weekend plans, I felt the weight of the past months lighten a bit. But just as I was beginning to relax, a familiar voice chilled the air around us. Well, if it isn't Sarah. "Looking a bit rough, aren't we?" Michael's voice was unmistakable. I looked up to see him standing there, smirking, with a woman clinging to his arm. I felt my face flush, a mix of embarrassment and anger. "Michael," I greeted stiffly, wishing the earth would swallow me whole. "And this is Vanessa, my fiancée. Isn't she just stunning?" Vanessa gave a tight-lipped smile, eyeing me up and down with thinly veiled disdain. Yes, Michael always did have a taste for, well, never mind. "Nice to meet you, Sarah." Michael leaned in, lowering his voice, though not his malice. "Seriously, Sarah, you look like you've aged a decade. What happened to you?" I remained silent, not trusting myself to speak without my voice shaking. Laura, however, was not about to let it slide. "Sarah's doing just fine, better even. Looks to me like life's treating her well." Michael snorted, giving me a final sneering look before turning away. "Come on, Vanessa, let's leave the past where it belongs." After they left, Laura turned to me, her expression a mix of concern and anger. "What was that all about?" "He's awful. And who talks like that?" Taking a deep breath, I filled her in on the brief version of my marriage, the high hopes, the prenup, the threats, the fallout. Everything spilled out in a low, hurried stream. Laura's eyes widened with every detail. "Sarah, why didn't you tell me you were dealing with all that? And a prenup?" "I'm a family lawyer, you know. I want to see that prenup. There could be something there, some way to challenge it." A few days later, I was in Laura's office, handing over the dusty documents that had sealed my fate. She pored over them with a furrowed brow, her pen flying over the pages as she made notes. "Sarah, there are several issues here," she finally said, looking up from the papers. "First, this was signed too close to the wedding. It's a pressure tactic. Second, you didn't have independent legal advice, which is huge. And third, he didn't disclose all his financial obligations, like that loan you ended up covering. That's misrepresentation. My heart raced as she laid out each point. It means, Laura continued with a smile, that we might just be able to challenge this. We've got a real shot here, Sarah. Sitting in the cold, stark courtroom, my hands were trembling, despite my best efforts to appear calm. The weight of what was at stake pressed heavily upon me, not just the potential financial outcome, but the deeper, more personal vindication against Michael's long-standing control and threats. Before the judge had even called the session to order, Michael leaned towards me from where he stood a few paces away. His voice was low, a venomous whisper meant only for me. You're a loser, Sarah. You can never beat me. I'll ruin you. And when I'm done, I'll take Jack from you too. Laura, standing by my side, gave my hand a quick, reassuring squeeze before we were called to present our case. As the proceedings began, Laura was methodical and fierce. She laid out the facts, pointing to the rushed nature of the prenuptial agreement signing and the glaring lack of independent legal counsel. She highlighted the financial disclosures that Michael had conveniently omitted, which directly impacted the terms of the prenup. Your Honor, the agreement my client was coerced into signing was not only unfair but fundamentally flawed in its execution, Laura argued passionately. We have clear grounds here to question its validity. Michael's lawyer tried to counter, arguing that everything had been above board, that I was merely having regrets after the fact. But Laura dismantled his points with precise legal references and the undeniable weight of evidence she'd compiled. After what felt like an eternity, the judge finally spoke. After reviewing the evidence and the circumstances under which the prenuptial agreement was signed, I am ruling to annul the agreement due to significant violations in its execution. The courtroom seemed to spin for a moment. Laura turned to me, a triumphant smile spreading across her face. We did it, Sarah, she whispered. Michael's reaction was instantaneous. His face turned a shade of red I'd never seen before as he stood up, his chair clattering behind him. This isn't over. You won't get a dime from me, he shouted, his voice echoing off the high ceilings. The judge warned him to settle down, but Michael's fury was palpable. As we left the courthouse, he followed, his threats spewing out like venom. I turned on my dictaphone and let it record every bitter word, every promise of revenge. You'll regret this, Sarah. I'll make sure of it, he hissed as we walked down the courthouse steps. Later, at the police station, I played the recording. An officer took notes, his expression growing increasingly concerned with each threat uttered. We'll give him a warning. He's not to contact you or approach you. Any further incidents, and we'll take more serious action, he promised. As I left the police station, the legal documents confirming my ownership of 2 city center apartments and several commercial properties securely in my bag, I felt a mix of exhaustion and exhilaration. Over $2 million in assets, it was almost impossible to comprehend. But more than the financial security, it was the freedom from Michael's shadow that felt like my true victory. The passive income from renting out real estate was more than enough to provide for Jack and me, and it allowed me to cut back on the frantic trading that had consumed so much of my time. These days, I spend a lot more time with Jack. He's growing up fast, and every moment with him feels precious. We often visit the park, and I watch him play, his laughter mingling with the breeze. One sunny afternoon, as Jack played on the swings, Laura joined us, her daughter Emily in tow. She plopped down on the bench next to me, a smile spreading across her face. You look good, Sarah. Really good. Like a weight's been lifted, she observed, handing me a cup of coffee she'd picked up on her way. Thanks, Laura. It feels that way, too, I replied, taking a grateful sip of the coffee. I'm thinking about buying a house, a real home for Jack and me. Something with a garden, maybe even a place for a dog. As we talked, the conversation shifted to Michael and how dramatically things had changed. Laura kept up with the legal community grapevine, which had plenty to say about my ex-husband's downfall. Word is, Michael's not doing so well. His new fiancée, Vanessa, left him, and a lot of his business partners have pulled back. They don't want to be associated with his reputation after the trial, Laura said, not hiding her disdain. I nodded, not surprised, but relieved I was no longer part of that drama. I heard about Vanessa. Can't say I'm surprised she didn't stick around. Michael's true colors are hard to live with. The idea of Michael's downfall didn't bring me joy, but there was a sense of justice in seeing someone who had done so much harm finally face the consequences of his actions. I was just glad to be out of the storm and into calmer waters. Our conversation drifted to lighter topics, upcoming school events, vacation plans, and community activities. Normal life stuff, the kind I had longed for during all those tumultuous years. Later that day, after Emily and Laura had left, Jack and I walked home, his small hand in mine. "Mom, can we really get a dog?" he asked, his eyes wide with hope. "Yeah, buddy, we can." I smiled down at him. "We'll have a big yard for him to play in, and you can help pick him out." Jack's excitement was infectious, and as we talked about what kind of dog we might get, I felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude for the new life we were able to build. It was a far cry from the uncertainty and strife of the past years. I no longer looked over my shoulder, worried about what Michael might do next. Instead, I looked forward, to house viewings, to Jack's laughter filling a home that was truly ours, to new memories made in a garden under the sun, and to the simple joy of picking out our new dog.
Lucas leaned forward. "Val, if I'd known about Olivia." "Olivia Turner," I cut in. "I looked her up. She's guest starring in that medical drama you produce. Another coincidence?" The silence stretched between us, heavy with 25 years of friendship and unspoken truths. Finally, Lucas pulled out his phone, tapped a few times, and slid it across the table. On the screen was a production photo. Nathan and Olivia in costume, standing too close, looking at each other with undisguised heat. "They met at the callback," Lucas said quietly. I thought it was just chemistry for the camera." I pushed the phone back, my hand steady despite the rage building in my chest. "How long have you known?" "I suspected, but..." "How long?" 3 weeks. He wouldn't meet my eyes. "I was going to tell you, but Nathan swore it was over. Said it was a mistake, that he loved you and Megan too much to..." My laugh cut through the restaurant's refined atmosphere, drawing stares from nearby tables. "Let me guess. He gave you his sincere face. The one with the little forehead crease and the slightly trembling lip? He's been perfecting that one since college theater." "Val, you know what's funny?" I took a long sip of wine. This morning, I was actually grateful for all those years of watching him rehearse. It taught me how to hide what I'm feeling, how to deliver my lines just right. Lucas's expression shifted to alarm. "What are you planning?" "Nothing dramatic," I smiled, remembering the way Nathan had kissed Megan's forehead this morning. So paternal, so pure. "Just thinking about that screenplay you mentioned wanting from me. The one about family dynamics and betrayal?" "Valeria," his voice carried a warning. "What? Isn't that what you always told me? Write what you know?" I pulled out my credit card as the waiter approached. "I think I finally have a story worth telling." "This isn't the way..." "Did you know Megan's been talking about following in her father's footsteps? Wants to study drama in college." I signed the receipt with deliberate strokes. "She thinks he's this brilliant artist who sacrificed everything for his craft, who deserves all this success because he worked so hard, stayed so true to his values. She deserves to keep that image of him." "Does she?" I met Lucas's gaze. "Or does she deserve to know that success built on lies isn't success at all? What about your success?" He gestured around us. "The corporate job, the stable life you've built? Built on what? Suppressing my own dreams? Playing the supportive wife while he..." I stopped, noticing my voice had risen again. When I continued, it was barely above a whisper. "You know what Nathan said to me last week? That I was lucky he'd helped me find my true calling in corporate work, since my writing never really had that special something." Lucas's face darkened. "He didn't." "Oh, but he did. Right after his commercial won that local advertising award." I stood, smoothing my skirt. "So yes, I think I'll write that screenplay. About a woman who discovers her husband's betrayal and decides to... Well, that would spoil the ending, wouldn't it?" "Val, wait. I have to go. Megan's alone at home and Nathan's at his charity event." I picked up my purse. "Thanks for dinner, Lucas, and for the inspiration. Sometimes the best stories come from unexpected places." As I walked away, I heard him call after me. What are you going to do? I didn't turn around. Let him wonder. Let them all wonder. After all, isn't that what good writing is about? Keeping your audience guessing until the final act? The Instagram account wasn't even private. That's what broke me. The sheer arrogance of it. Nathan's alternate profile filled with artsy black and white photos of Olivia in various states of carefully curated intimacy. Her hand on his chest. Their shadows merged on a wall. Her lipstick mark on a coffee cup. The timestamps mocked me. 6 months. While I was planning Megan's Sweet 16, while I was supporting his networking events, while I was playing the dutiful corporate wife, they were crafting their little visual love story. My laptop hummed as I scrolled through their digital affair. Each photo carried a pretentious caption, quotes about passion, about living authentically, about following your heart. The latest one showed Olivia's silhouette in a hotel window, posted 3 hours ago. Beauty exists in the spaces between reality and dreams. The front door clicked open downstairs. I heard Nathan's footsteps, then Megan's excited voice. Dad, you have to tell Mom about the audition. I closed the laptop, my fingers trembling slightly as I stood. Their voices drifted up the stairs. Actually, Princess, let me talk to her alone first. Adult stuff. But why don't you order that pizza we talked about? Use my card. I met them at the bottom of the stairs. Nathan's smile was bright, practiced. The same one he used in his commercials. Val, you won't believe what happened at the network meeting. Let me guess, I said, my voice steady. They loved your authentic energy. His smile flickered. How did you... That's your favorite word lately, isn't it? Authentic? I pulled out my phone, opened Instagram. Like this photo from 2 weeks ago. Authenticity is the light that guides us home. The color drained from his face. Behind him, Megan froze with her father's credit card halfway to her phone. Mom, what are you talking about? Nothing, honey, Nathan said quickly. Just some promotional materials for what? I turned my phone toward him. Your artistic exploration of hotel room photography? Or maybe your deep insights into shadow play with actresses half your age? Valeria, his voice dropped to that warning tone he used when he thought I was being difficult. This isn't the time or place. When is the time, Nathan? Between charity events? Between auditions? Between making our daughter believe you're something you're not? What's going on? Megan's voice cracked. Dad? He reached for her, but she stepped back. Smart girl. She'd always been able to smell a performance. It's complicated, sweetheart. Is it? I scrolled through the photos. Seems pretty simple to me. Boy meets girl, boy lies to wife, boy posts artistic evidence of affair online because he thinks he's too special for consequences. You're twisting everything, Nathan snapped. This is my art, my career. Your career? I laughed, the sound sharp enough to make them both flinch. The one I funded? The one I supported while putting my own dreams aside? That career? Mom. Megan's eyes were wide, darting between us. I was going to tell you, Nathan said, switching to his sincere voice, the one that had won him that local Emmy. After the pilot gets picked up, once things were stable, like you told Lucas, the look of shock on his face was almost worth it. Oh yes, he knew. Everyone knew except your wife and daughter. How's that for authentic? Megan's phone clattered to the floor. She ran upstairs, her door slamming seconds later. Now look what you've done, Nathan hissed. You couldn't wait? Couldn't handle this like an adult? Like you handled it, with secret accounts and artistic quotes about following your heart? I never meant to get caught? I held up my phone again. Here's my favorite caption. Sometimes the greatest act of love is letting go of the life you thought you wanted. Posted right after Megan's birthday party. While I was cleaning up the decorations you promised to help with. He reached for me, but I stepped back, just like Megan had. The gesture felt like poetry, like something I might write into a scene. Don't worry, I said, pocketing my phone. I'm taking your advice, letting go of the life I thought I wanted, starting with this marriage. Val, I'm going to check on our daughter, and then I'm going to write something authentic about a man who thought he was too special for consequences. I started up the stairs, then paused. By the way, congratulations on the pilot. Break a leg. I mean that literally. My laptop screen flickered in the darkness of my home office as I typed the opening scene. Interior, living room, night. A woman stands at the window, watching her life unravel in real time. 3 days since the Instagram revelation. 3 days of Megan barely speaking to either of us. 3 days of Nathan sleeping in the guest room, making tearful phone calls he thought I couldn't hear. A knock at my door made me jump. Mom? Megan's voice uncertain. Can I show you something? I closed the laptop. Come in, honey. She entered, clutching her phone like a shield. Her eyes were red-rimmed, her hair pulled back in a messy bun, so different from her usual carefully styled appearance. I found something else. About Dad and Her. My stomach clenched. You don't have to. They're doing a play together. She thrust the phone at me. At the community theater, where you and Dad met. The casting announcement swam before my eyes. Betrayal by Harold Pinter. Leading roles, Nathan Martin and Olivia Turner. Directed by Marcus Chen, Nathan's old college roommate. Opening night is on your anniversary, Megan said quietly. Of course it was, because the universe wasn't finished teaching me about irony. Did you know? I said, setting down the phone. That's the play where your father and I had our first kiss? I was understudying the lead actress and she got food poisoning opening weekend. Mom? He said I saved the show, called it destiny. I laughed, but it came out wrong. I quit acting after that, said I preferred writing. Truth was, I knew I couldn't compete with his talent, his ambition. Stop! Megan's voice cracked. Just stop pretending you're okay. I'm not pretending. I opened my laptop again. I'm writing. She moved behind me, reading over my shoulder. Her breath caught. Is that about Dad? It's about a lot of things. I scrolled through the pages I'd written. About choices. About what happens when we build our lives around other people's dreams. He's saying it was a mistake. She sat beside me. That Olivia meant nothing. That he wants to fix things. And you believe him? I don't know what to believe anymore. She picked up a framed photo from my desk. The three of us at her middle school graduation. Everything feels fake now, like we were just acting at being a family. My phone buzzed. Lucas. Network loved your outline. Want to meet tomorrow? This could be big. Another buzz. Nathan. Please, we need to talk. About the show. About us. About everything. A third buzz. An unknown number. Hi Valeria, this is Olivia. I think we should meet. Megan watched the messages appear. What are you going to do? I looked at my screenplay, at the blinking cursor waiting for the next scene. What do you think I should do? I think... She hesitated, then squared her shoulders. I think you should finish your story. The real one. Even if it hurts people we love? Doesn't lying hurt more? She stood, suddenly looking older than her 16 years. Dad always says art should tell the truth. Let's see if he really believes that. After she left, I stared at the messages. Each one a different path, a different version of revenge or redemption. The writer in me saw the possibilities. Confront Olivia, expose Nathan, use Lucas's offer to tell my story to the world. But Megan's words echoed. Doesn't lying hurt more? I opened a new document and began to type. Interior. Theater. Night. A woman watches from the wings as her husband rehearses a play about betrayal with his mistress. But this isn't that story. This is about what happens next. About the moment she stops being an understudy in her own life. My fingers flew across the keyboard, no longer hesitating. Sometimes the best revenge isn't about destroying someone else's story. It's about finally telling your own. I texted Lucas back. Meeting tomorrow, 9 a.m. Bringing the first act with me. Then I blocked Nathan's number, deleted Olivia's message and kept writing until dawn broke over my new beginning. The network conference room felt too bright, too sterile for the scene unfolding behind its glass walls. Lucas stood at the whiteboard, pitching my screenplay to a room full of executives while I watched their faces for reactions. Every nod, every scribbled note, every shared glance felt like another nail in Nathan's coffin. It's raw, the development executive said, tapping her pen against my script. The protagonist's anger feels personal. That's what makes it compelling, Lucas answered before I could. It's authentic. That word again. I suppressed a laugh. We'd need to change some details, another exec said. Legal considerations. Of course, I smiled. The same smile I'd practiced in community theater decades ago. I'm open to suggestions. The meeting ended with handshakes and promises of contracts. As we walked to the elevator, Lucas grabbed my arm. They're going to fast-track it. This could air within months. Good. Val, wait. He pulled me aside. Nathan called me this morning. He knows about the meeting. The elevator dinged. Empty. We stepped inside. How? Olivia. She's friends with someone in development. Lucas pressed the lobby button. They're both worried about what you're writing. They should be. He's threatening to sue. Says he can prove it's about him, that it will destroy his chance at the cable series. I watched the floor numbers descend. Funny how he's more worried about his career than his marriage. This isn't just about Nathan anymore. If he sues, the network will pull out. Your chance at writing again? My phone buzzed. Megan. Dad's at the house. He's packing your scripts. The elevator stopped. Wrong floor. The doors opened to reveal Olivia Turner. She stepped in, pressing herself against the opposite wall. Younger in person. Beautiful in that careful way that required constant maintenance. She wore the same shade of lipstick from Nathan's Instagram photos. Valeria, she said quietly. I tried to reach you. I know. Lucas shifted uncomfortably between us as the elevator resumed its descent. It's not what you think, Olivia continued. Nathan and I. Save it for your performance. I checked my phone again. Megan. He's in your office. What should I do? The elevator reached the lobby. As I stepped out, Olivia called after me. He never loved me. It was always you. I turned back. That's the problem. He never loved me enough to be honest. Val, Lucas started. I need to go. I was already walking away. Nathan's at my house. Don't do anything. Stupid? I laughed. Too late. I drove home in a daze, remembering the first play Nathan and I did together. He'd been so genuine then, so raw with talent and dreams. When had that changed? When had we both started performing instead of living? Nathan's car sat in our driveway. Inside, I found him in my office, surrounded by scattered papers. Early drafts of my screenplay, notes, character sketches. You can't do this, he said without looking up. You'll ruin everything. You already did that. He held up a page. Is this how you see me? A narcissist who trades authenticity for applause? If the description fits. Mom, Megan appeared in the doorway. I tried to stop him. It's okay, honey. I kept my eyes on Nathan. Your father was just leaving. Not without these. He gathered the papers. I'm taking them to my lawyer. Those are copies. I smiled, thinking of the final draft safely stored in multiple cloud accounts. The real script is already with the network. Signed, sealed, and in development. He froze. You're bluffing. Am I? You taught me well, Nathan. About performing, about timing, about waiting for the perfect moment to deliver the killing line. This isn't one of your plays. No, I agreed. It's better, because this time, I'm writing the ending. He stood, papers crumpling in his fists. I'll stop you. Like you stopped Olivia from coming to the network meeting today? I watched his face pale. She sends her regards, by the way. Something about how you never really loved her. Megan made a small sound. Nathan turned to her, reaching out, but she backed away. Princess, don't. She moved to stand beside me. Just don't. Nathan looked between us, his actor's composure cracking. Without another word, he dropped the papers and left. The front door slammed. His car started. Megan picked up one of the scattered pages. Scene 4. A daughter realizes her father's greatest performance was being a father at all. We can change that line, I said softly. No. She handed me the page. It's perfect. It's authentic. I took the paper, thinking of contracts and lawyers and consequences. But for the first time in 20 years, I felt real. Unscripted. Free. Opening night of Betrayal at the community theater. I sat in the back row, watching my husband perform opposite his mistress, speaking lines about infidelity and deception while the audience leaned forward in their seats, oblivious to the real drama unfolding before them. My phone vibrated. Lucas. Network lawyers want to meet. Tomorrow. It's urgent. Another message from my corporate boss, Pauline. Need to discuss your extended leave request. HR involvement likely. Then Megan. Dad's lawyer called. Says you have to stop the project or they'll take everything. The irony of watching Nathan perform this particular play wasn't lost on me. Harold Pinter would have appreciated the layers of betrayal happening on and off stage. I certainly did. During intermission, I slipped backstage, muscle memory guiding me through the familiar corridors. Nathan's dressing room door stood ajar. Inside, Olivia perched on his makeup counter while he paced. They can't prove it's about us, she was saying. It's just a story. You don't know, Val, Nathan replied. Every detail will be perfect, every accusation crafted to... He stopped when he saw me. What are you doing here? Supporting local theater. I leaned against the doorframe. Brilliant performance, by the way. Both of you. The scene where Emma confesses her affair? Almost believed it. Olivia slid off the counter. I should stay. I smiled. This concerns you too. The network loves the script, by the way. Especially the part where the younger actress realizes she's just another stepping stone in an aging actor's desperate grab at relevance. You vindictive bitch, Nathan snarled, dropping his cultivated stage voice. You think you can just destroy everything I've built? Everything we built, I corrected. Or did you forget who paid for your first headshots? Who covered the mortgage while you did unpaid theater work? Who raised your daughter while you chased fame? Mom? I turned. Megan stood in the hallway, still wearing her theater volunteer badge. Her face was pale, makeup streaked with tears. Honey, Nathan started. Don't. She looked past him to Olivia. I trusted you. You said you were helping him with character work, that all those private rehearsals were necessary. Megan, it's complicated, Olivia tried. No, it's not. Megan's voice cracked. It's actually really simple. You're both liars. A stagehand appeared. 5 minutes to places. Nathan reached for his daughter, but she backed away. Princess, please, stop acting, Megan shouted. Heads turned in the hallway. Just stop! For once in your life, be real! She ran. Nathan moved to follow, but I blocked him. You have a show to finish! Isn't that what matters most? This isn't over, he growled. My lawyer will sue me? Expose me? Go ahead. I stepped closer. But remember who taught me about timing, about building tension, about waiting for the perfect moment to deliver the killing blow. You made me a better writer, Nathan. Every lie, every betrayal, every moment of gaslighting. It's all there in the script. Your greatest performance. Preserved forever. The stagehand called again. Nathan's jaw clenched. You'll lose everything. I already did. I turned to leave, then paused. Break a leg. Again. I mean that literally. Outside, I found Megan in my car, sobbing. I slid into the driver's seat but didn't start the engine. I posted about it, she whispered. The truth. About Dad and Olivia, about your script, everything. My phone started buzzing with notifications. Local theater groups, Nathan's fan pages, entertainment blogs, all lighting up with the story. I'm sorry, Megan said. I just couldn't watch them pretend anymore. I pulled her close, feeling her tears soak my shoulder. Through the windshield, I watched the theater's marquee lights blink against the darkening sky. 20 years ago, Nathan and I had kissed under those lights. Both of us dreaming of bigger stages, brighter futures. My phone kept buzzing. Lucas, the network, lawyers, reporters, all wanting answers, explanations, statements. The story was breaking, but not the way I'd planned. Not through my carefully crafted screenplay, but through my daughter's raw, unfiltered truth. I started the car. Sometimes the best revenge isn't the one you plan. Sometimes it's the one that happens when you finally stop performing and let the truth speak for itself. Let's go home, I said. The real show's about to begin. The network executives sat around the conference table, my screenplay spread before them like evidence at a trial. Nathan's lawyer stood at the window, his reflection a dark smudge against the city skyline. Lucas hadn't shown up. Mrs. Martin, the lawyer said, my client is willing to be generous despite your creative interpretation of events. I traced the title page of my script. Generous how? Full ownership of the house, a substantial settlement. All he asks is that you shelve the screenplay. The head executive, Sarah Chen, cleared her throat. Given the legal complications, we're considering postponing development. You can't. I pulled out my phone, opened Megan's viral post. The story's already out there. 3 million views since last night. Every major entertainment blog is running with it. Which is why, the lawyer interjected, we need to contain this quickly. The conference room door opened. Nathan walked in, followed by Olivia. He'd aged overnight, his carefully maintained appearance cracking around the edges. No makeup could hide the defeat in his eyes. Val, he said softly, please. The network's offering 7 figures, Sarah said, for exclusive rights. We'll bury it. Everyone saves face. I looked at Olivia, who wouldn't meet my eyes. Nothing to add? No more performances to give? I never meant, she started. To get caught? To become part of someone else's story instead of the star of your own? I stood. Neither did I. But here we are. Think about Megan, Nathan pleaded. I am thinking about Megan. About what you taught her about truth, about authenticity, about... The door opened again. Lucas entered, followed by Pauline Carter, my corporate boss. Sorry we're late, Lucas said. Had to pick up your biggest fan. Pauline strode to the table, her heels clicking like punctuation marks. I just read the script, all of it, including the parts about the corporate wife who enables her husband's dreams while suppressing her own. She turned to Sarah. If you don't produce this, we will. You don't have the rights, Nathan's lawyer started. Actually, Lucas pulled out a document. We do. Valeria signed with my production company last night, and Pauline's media conglomerate just acquired us. Nathan slumped in his chair. You planned this. No, I smiled. That's the beauty of it. Sometimes the truth creates its own momentum. Like your performance last night, the one you couldn't finish because the audience started reading Megan's post mid-show. Art imitating life, imitating art. The settlement offer stands, his lawyer insisted. Counteroffer. I opened my laptop, turned it toward them. I just finished the final scene. Want to hear it? Nobody spoke. I read anyway. Interior. Conference room. Day. A woman faces the people who tried to silence her story. She realizes that revenge isn't about destroying someone else's narrative. It's about finally telling your own. That's it? Olivia asked. That's it. No dramatic confrontations, no public humiliation, just the truth, finally spoken aloud. I closed the laptop. The rest is up to the audience. You'll regret this, Nathan said, but his voice lacked conviction. Maybe, but I regret the last 20 years more. I gathered my things. Pauline, Lucas, shall we discuss production schedules? As we left, Sarah called out, What about the network deal? I paused at the door. Submit a bid like everyone else. I hear there's quite a bidding war starting. Something about authenticity being very marketable these days. In the elevator, Pauline squeezed my arm. You know what impressed me most? That scene where the wife realizes her corporate job wasn't a compromise. It was preparation. Learning to navigate power plays, to recognize manipulation, to stand her ground. I had a good teacher. You had good material. Lucas grinned. Though I still think we should end with the theater scene. No! I watched the numbers descend. Let the audience write their own ending. That's what Nathan never understood. The best stories don't tell people what to think. They make them feel what's true. My phone buzzed. Megan. Dad's moving out. Can we order pizza and work on my college applications? I'm thinking of majoring in creative writing. I showed the message to Lucas and Pauline. They both nodded, understanding. Now that, I said, is what I call a satisfying third act. The elevator doors opened to a lobby full of reporters. Time for one final performance. This time, as myself. The premiere screening room hummed with anticipation. My screenplay, authentic performance, filled the screen while critics and industry executives whispered in the darkness. In the back row, Megan squeezed my hand as the final scene played out. On screen, the wife confronted her husband not with rage or accusations, but with silence. The kind that forces people to fill it with truth. Just like I'd done in real life. The lights came up. Applause erupted. But I watched Nathan's empty seat in the third row. He'd received an invitation but chosen not to come. His latest Instagram post showed him at a regional theater in Ohio, playing Willie Loman in Death of a Salesman. Fitting. Mom? Megan nodded toward the exit where Olivia stood, looking uncertain. Go ahead, I said to Lucas and Pauline. We'll meet you at the reception. Olivia approached as the room emptied. She'd lost the careful polish I remembered, looked younger somehow. More real. I didn't expect to be written so fairly, she said. The truth was dramatic enough without embellishment. Nathan called me yesterday, asked me to tell you he's sorry. Of course he did, I smiled. Still casting others in his scenes? He's different now, smaller somehow. That's what happens when you step out of the spotlight and into yourself. Megan stood. We should go. The critics will want interviews. Olivia touched my arm. For what it's worth, I'm sorry too. Not just for the affair, but for not seeing what he was doing to both of us, making us compete for supporting roles in his story. Keep that insight, I said. It'll make you a better actress. At the reception, champagne flowed while early reviews rolled in. Brutally honest. A masterclass in understated revenge. A meditation on authenticity in an age of performance. Lucas raised his glass. To your next screenplay? Actually, I pulled out my phone, showed him the email I'd received that morning. The theater department at Megan's future college wants me to teach a workshop about writing truth in fiction. Mom's gonna help me adapt my college application essay into a one-act play, Megan added, about watching your heroes become human. Pauline joined us, brandishing her tablet. Social media's exploding. Nathan's trending, but not how he would have wanted. People are sharing their own stories of betrayal and redemption. That's the thing about truth, I said. It echoes. My phone buzzed. A text from Nathan. Watching it now. You made me better than I deserved. I showed Megan the message. She read it, then deleted it. Some performances don't need an encore. Later, walking home through city streets, I remembered that first text I'd found on Nathan's phone, the one that started everything. Can't wait to feel your hands on me again. Last night was magical. Love you. Such simple words, such devastating power, like the words I'd written in response, scenes and dialogue that had transformed my pain into purpose. What are you thinking about? Megan asked. The difference between revenge and justice. And? Revenge is what we imagine will heal us. Justice is what actually does. She linked her arm through mine. Is that why you didn't destroy him completely? You could have made him the villain. The best stories don't have villains, I said. Just people failing to be their best selves, sometimes spectacularly. We reached our front door. Through the window, I could see my laptop on the coffee table, waiting. Another screenplay taking shape in my mind, this one about mothers and daughters and the stories we inherit. Ready to work on that one act? I asked. Megan grinned. Only if you promise to be honest about how you really felt. No performing. Deal. I opened the door to our house, our future, our truth. Though sometimes the most authentic thing we can do is admit we're still rehearsing. The night air carried the faint sound of applause from the reception, but I was already thinking about tomorrow's scenes, tomorrow's words, tomorrow's truths. Some stories end with revenge, others with redemption. The best ones end with possibility. The next act waiting in the wings, raw and real and ready to begin.
It's funny how one sentence can completely upend your life. I want a break. Those 4 words from my husband, Mark, started me on a roller coaster journey that I could never have anticipated. As I dove into a web of deception, betrayal, and cunning schemes, I realized that some games are far deadlier than they appear. Teaming up with my best friend, Jenna, we embarked on a mission that would not only test our wits, but the very fabric of our bonds. If you think you know about trust, revenge, and the dark corners of human nature, think again. My name is Amber, and this is the most unexpected chapter of my life. It was a chilly Sunday evening when my husband, Mark, looked up from his book and uttered those 5 words that would send my life into a whirlwind. "I want a break," he murmured, barely audible. I thought I'd misheard him, so I paused the movie we were half watching. "What did you say?" I asked, my heart pounding in my chest. I'd expected a lot of things to come out of his mouth, but not that. He repeated it, clearer this time, avoiding my gaze. I said, "I want a break." The air in the room suddenly felt denser. My mind raced with 1,000 thoughts. Why? What's wrong? Was it something I did? I wondered. Before I could even respond, he added, "There's someone else." The world seemed to spin. Someone else? After 15 years of marriage, after countless memories, joys, and challenges we'd faced together, he was just throwing it all away? "What do you mean, someone else?" I choked out, feeling the sting of tears, but I was determined not to cry. "Not yet." He hesitated, took a deep breath, and then said, "It's not what you think. It's not an affair." Confused and struggling to grasp the situation, I pressed on. "Then what is it, Mark? What's going on?" He sighed, seemingly conflicted. It's Brad." "Brad? As in Brad, his best friend from college? The same Brad who had been our wedding's best man? The one who'd come over for barbecues, birthdays, and every Super Bowl Sunday?" My brain refused to connect the dots. "Brad? What does he have to do with any of this?" I asked, my voice shaking. Mark hesitated again, rubbing his temples. He approached me with an offer, an investment opportunity. It's high risk, but the rewards could set us up for life. I've taken our savings and invested them. Everything. I didn't want to tell you until I was sure it would pay off. I felt like the floor had disappeared beneath me. All our savings, the money we'd worked so hard for, our dreams of traveling, of securing a future for our kids, it was all gone. "And you need a break because," I pressed. "I'm scared," he admitted. "If it fails, I've ruined our future. I needed some time to see it through without the pressure of explaining daily updates. I thought it would be easier for both of us." I took a moment to absorb everything. The betrayal was immense, not just from Mark, but from Brad, too. My world had been turned upside down, and I was left reeling, not knowing where to turn. Then a thought crossed my mind. How can I be sure this isn't a scheme? That Brad isn't taking advantage of you? Mark looked pained. "I trust him," he said simply. "That's what you said about us," I retorted bitterly. A silence fell over the room, only interrupted by the soft hum of the heater. In my head, a plan was forming. I wouldn't stand by and watch as our life savings disappeared into the abyss. If Brad had genuinely offered an investment, I would ensure that we got our money back, even if it meant playing a bit dirty. I thought about it long and hard. "All right, Mark," I finally said, determination lacing my voice. "Take your break, but know this, I will get to the bottom of this. If Brad is being honest, great. If not, he's going to regret ever crossing our path." With that, I started my mission. It was time for a little revenge, the type that was best served cold. I needed information and a plan. The first person that came to mind was my best friend, Jenna. She worked in the world of corporate investigations and had a knack for getting to the bottom of things. Plus, she'd been suspicious of Brad for years. The next day, over coffee, I spilled everything to Jenna. As I recounted the story, her eyes grew wider. "I knew there was something off about him," she murmured. "But don't worry, we've got this." With her resources and my determination, We began our investigation. We started by looking into the investment opportunity Brad had mentioned, a new tech startup aiming to revolutionize some segment of the digital world. On the surface, it seemed legitimate, but something felt off. Jenna managed to get a list of all the investors, and there among the names was a shock. Several of them were people who had been scammed in the past, people with a history of making poor financial decisions. It looked like Brad was preying on the vulnerable, using their trust to his advantage. But how was he benefiting? Jenna dug deeper and found that a mysterious offshore account was linked to the startup. Every time an investor put in money, a percentage was siphoned off to this account. The breadcrumbs were leading straight to Brad. I was livid, not just for Mark and me, but for all the innocent people Brad was taking advantage of. It was time to confront him. But Jenna had a different idea. "Why not play him at his own game?" she said, a mischievous glint in her eye. I was intrigued. "Go on." Jenna's plan was genius. Using a pseudonym, she'd reach out to Brad, expressing interest in investing a substantial amount. The catch? She'd insist on meeting the team behind the startup and seeing the operations firsthand. Brad took the bait. Within days, we had an appointment set up at their office, which turned out to be a rented space in a high-rise downtown. Disguised and with hidden cameras, Jenna and I entered the building. We were led into a posh office where a visibly nervous Brad greeted us. He introduced us to the team, a group of young folks who looked just as uneasy. As Jenna questioned them, it became evident that they had been hired for the day. The more we prodded, the more the story unraveled. The prototype they showed us was nothing more than a generic app, and their business plan was filled with buzzwords and no real substance. Finally, unable to take it any longer, I confronted Brad. Removing my disguise, I watched as recognition, then panic, flashed in his eyes. "I knew you were a scammer, Brad," I hissed, "but I never thought you'd sink so low." Brad tried to bluster his way out, but with the evidence we had, it was game over. Jenna discreetly passed the footage to the authorities. As we left the building, I felt a weight lifting off my shoulders. But there was still one more thing to do. Tell Mark the truth about his best friend. Mark had retreated to his parents' house during this break. I hadn't spoken to him since that Sunday evening, but with everything I had discovered, it was time for a conversation. Driving to his parents' place felt like the longest journey of my life. The evening sun cast long shadows on the road, and my thoughts were a tumultuous whirlwind of anger, sadness, and resolve. When I arrived, Mark was on the porch. He looked drained, shadows under his eyes hinting at sleepless nights. As I approached, he stood up, and the weight of our shared history seemed to hang in the air. Before he could speak, I handed him a tablet, where Jenna had compiled all the evidence. "Watch," I instructed. The color drained from his face as he realized the extent of Brad's deceit. The person he'd entrusted with our life savings was nothing more than a con artist. I can't believe it," he whispered. "How did I fall for this?" A myriad of emotions welled up inside me, but the overwhelming one was compassion. Yes, he had betrayed my trust by not consulting me, but he too was a victim. I took a deep breath. "We're in this together, Mark. Always have been. Now let's figure out how to fix it." The following days were a whirlwind. The police, armed with the evidence Jenna and I had gathered, raided Brad's home. They found stacks of cash, falsified documents, and enough evidence to put him behind bars for a long time. The media caught wind of the story, dubbing Brad the trust betrayer. As for the other investors, they were grateful for my efforts in exposing the scam. Many had invested even more than Mark and were facing financial ruin. Together, we started a support group, navigating the legal quagmire and helping each other cope with the emotional fallout. The courts froze Brad's assets, and while it was a lengthy process, most of the investors got a portion of their money back. It wasn't everything, but it was a start. Mark and I, amidst all the chaos, started couples therapy. We delved into the issues that had led to that fateful decision, and slowly, the chasm between us began to close. Trust, once broken, is hard to mend, but we were both determined to rebuild. Just as life seemed to be finding some semblance of normality, there was a twist I hadn't seen coming. I received an anonymous letter in the mail. The handwriting was unfamiliar and shaky, but the message was clear. You think you've won, but this is just the beginning. Brad was a pawn in a bigger game. Be careful, or you might just lose everything. A cold shiver ran down my spine. Was this some cruel joke, or was there more to Brad's scheme than met the eye? I immediately called Jenna. We missed something, I said tersely. Over the next few days, Jenna and I dove deeper. Brad had been in contact with someone codenamed the Puppeteer. Through encrypted emails, they had communicated extensively. The Puppeteer was the brains behind the operation, while Brad was just the face of the scam. The more we dug, the darker things became. The Puppeteer was linked to various shady dealings worldwide. They had a reputation for being elusive and had never been caught. But why target me with that letter? It didn't make sense until Jenna made a shocking discovery. Remember that night at the high-rise when we confronted Brad? She asked. I nodded. Well, there was someone else there, watching. Jenna showed me the footage from our hidden cameras. In the background, almost obscured by shadows, was a figure observing our confrontation. They left just before the police arrived. The realization was terrifying. The Puppeteer had been close, watching every move. They knew who I was and where I lived. I think they're threatened by you, Jenna mused. You managed to disrupt one of their biggest schemes. They're scared. But I didn't feel powerful or triumphant. I felt exposed and vulnerable. With Jenna's contacts, we heightened our security. Cameras, alarms, and even a personal security detail. I felt like I was in a thriller movie, but this was no fiction. My life, and that of my family, was at stake. Then, a breakthrough. One of Jenna's contacts in the tech world managed to trace a transaction back to the Puppeteer. It was a tiny slip on their part, but it was all we needed. We discovered their real identity. Clara Bennett, a former Wall Street genius who had turned rogue after a personal tragedy. With her intelligence and resources, she'd masterminded various schemes, defrauding innocent people of millions. Confronting her wouldn't be easy. She was careful, always 2 steps ahead, but Jenna had a plan. Jenna's plan was audacious. It involved playing Clara at her own game, using deceit and strategy. The only way to catch a snake is to become one, Jenna said cryptically. We started by leaking fake information about a supposed multi-million-dollar investment opportunity. The bait was designed to be irresistible to Clara, a tech innovation that promised to disrupt the entire industry. Jenna had connections with a couple of actors who posed as the inventors, giving interviews and showcasing their invention. Sure enough, within days, we got a bite. An anonymous offer came in to buy out the technology. We arranged a meeting to discuss the deal. Given Clara's caution, we knew she'd send a representative, but we were prepared. The meeting was set in a lavish penthouse suite, wired with hidden cameras and microphones. I posed as the assistant to the inventors, while Jenna stayed behind the scenes, coordinating with our security team. A sharp-looking woman in her 30s, undoubtedly Clara's right hand, arrived to negotiate. She was skeptical and shrewd, asking detailed questions about the tech. Our actor friends played their part to perfection, convincing her of the opportunity. After hours of negotiation, we had a signed contract, and most importantly, a direct line of communication to Clara. The representative made a call right there, discussing terms and the significant numbers involved. Using voice recognition software, we confirmed our suspicion. Clara Bennett was on the other line. Over the next few days, we staged a series of accidents, causing delays and increasing the pressure on Clara. We wanted her to get involved personally. And then, the moment we had been waiting for. Clara requested a face-to-face meeting. She wanted to see the tech herself and finalize the deal. The location was a secluded mansion, one of Clara's many hideouts. With our security detail and local law enforcement hidden nearby, Jenna and I walked into the lion's den. The atmosphere was thick with tension as Clara, a tall, imposing woman with piercing eyes, greeted us. I have to say, I'm impressed, she began, her voice dripping with condescension. But did you really think you could fool me? For a moment, my heart sank. Had she seen through our ruse? But then Jenna stepped forward, pulling out the signed contract. Actually, Clara, we did. The room erupted into chaos. Clara's guards tried to intervene, but they were no match for our team. Within minutes, Clara was in cuffs, the weight of her many crimes finally catching up to her. The aftermath was intense. The media went wild over the story of Clara Bennett's capture. Mark and I appeared on numerous talk shows telling our tale. Our bond, which had been so strained, grew stronger than ever. The threat of Clara and her schemes was finally over. And while the journey had been harrowing in the end, love and persistence had triumphed over deceit.